The way that I give feedback for thesis seminar is as follows. I typically only leave feedback in the Word document. That is the Word document that's shared both with each student and me as requested. So I usually don't go in and look constantly at your work. In fact, I just won't look at it until you're ready for me to do that. And there's reasons why I do that. Some students want or need more feedback than others. There's some students who like a lot of feedback. There's some students that are easily overwhelmed by the amount of feedback that I might give. So I think it's important that each one of you really evaluates the work that you've done, and then when you feel you're ready for me to look at something, email me. And in this case, we're using InGrade, and I'm asking you to email me there when you want me to look at something specific. And I say something specific if you want me to look at a certain part of your text. One of the easiest ways to do that is to leave comments in the Microsoft Word document where you want me to look. You can simply leave a question as a comment, so I can go directly to those questions and give very specific feedback to certain parts. If you want me to look more globally at things, look at the whole document, or look at the topic sentences, or look at the organization, or look at the coherence, or whatever it might be, try to be as specific as possible. Again, whether you leave comments in Microsoft Word or that you leave a message in InGrade when you request that I look at it. But I typically will not go into the document unless you request it. And sometimes if you're not used to working this way, if you feel that I'm not looking at it and you're not requesting it, it's again not because I'm not interested. It's so that you don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of feedback that I give. When I do look at something, I tend to look at it fairly closely and will typically give comments, or I typically have a coding system that I use where I'll just leave a code. For example, I may use WO for word order, or I may use APA if there's some issue with regard to APA. I may use FRAG, FRAG for sentence fragment. A lot of times I'll just leave the code where then you are given the opportunity to look and see if you can detect the error. I typically give only the codes when I think that there are errors that I think that you can correct, or that you can find the solution on your own. But obviously, if there is a time where I do that and you're not sure how to correct it, then you need to ask. You need to either email me or come to my office. We can discuss those types of errors. So I typically use that approach. If it's something that is out of the ordinary, or perhaps a type of error that I think might need further explanation, I'll leave a note there. I'll leave further explanation in those cases. But typically, I'll just leave the code. But at the same time, I usually go through and will indicate in most cases those occurrences as I see them. And so it's very important when you're looking at the errors or the feedback that I'm giving that you look for tendencies in your own errors. So you look at all of your work and you'll probably recognize certain errors that you're committing more than others. So I would typically take each one of those errors at a time as you go through the entire document and you're making those modifications, instead of looking at it throughout the document, taking one error at a time, going kind of chronological or going in a sequence. I would take it one error at a time and look at the entire document. So if you have a lot of sentence fragments, find out how to correct them, and then find all those occurrences of sentence fragments and correct all of those. Then go through and maybe check all of the errors that relate to punctuation. Then go through and find those errors that apply maybe to capitalization, and so on. I think if you do it this way, you'll learn to recognize those errors, which is the most important, and two, you're less likely to miss over the errors because you're focusing on one at a time. Now, the only exception to this feedback approach is that there are times throughout the course, based on our schedule that we discussed the first day of class, that I will go through and look at everyone's work. So when there are due dates for the literature review, when there's a due date for the method section or the results in the discussion section and so on, then I will go through and look at the entire work. And again, those are very important dates to make sure that you've completed each of the respective sections by those due dates. But that's a little bit different. I typically only go through the work to give feedback as you requested. And when I do give feedback, I focus typically on coherence first. So I'll first look at the organization and see that the ideas are flowing, and I don't typically look at it at the sentence level, but at the essay level. I look at first the thesis statement and the research questions to make sure they align. If they align, obviously that's based on a researchable problem, so there has to be a problem stated someplace, or it needs to be brought into our tutoring session so that I'm aware of a researchable problem, but it needs to be evident. It needs to be very obvious what that problem is based on the thesis statement and the research questions. Then once those two align, then I'll look at the thesis statement and the topic sentences. So I won't look at the entire development of each paragraph, but I'll simply look at the topic sentences, and that is the first sentence of each body paragraph, to make sure that they align with the thesis statement and also they're presented in an order which is logical. And there's some other videos and pages I've been sharing with you and discussing with you with regard to how do you organize your literature review based on premises and claims. And basically that's what I'm looking at. Again, just the organization and the clarity of those ideas in relationship to the thesis statement. Once you're good to go along with those lines, then I look at the actual development of each body paragraph. So then I look at the topic sentence in relationship to the supporting sentences. And we'll talk more about that with regard to the meal plan. This is an acronym that I used for development of paragraphs. But then I start looking more specifically at cohesion and looking at how each body paragraph is developing one idea, and also how the paragraphs transition and flow from one idea to the next. So at that point, that's typically where errors like spelling and cohesion and punctuation come into play. I kind of go from global errors to local errors. Global errors meaning errors that really interfere with understanding the thoughts that you're sharing. Local errors being more specific to grammar that don't necessarily interfere with the general idea, but nonetheless they're important to address. So I typically move from global errors to local errors, and again provide feedback to those students who request it via email. The final thing I'll say about feedback is that during our tutoring sessions, I will open up the Word document that you're using, so we'll always be talking and discussing your progress in terms of what you've uploaded to the Word document. I may at that time, depending on our conversations, leave comments, so if it's something important or if we're looking and referencing something very specific to your text, I will leave comments at that time so that you can go back easily and remember and recall what we discussed. So it is important to try to upload and work as much or as often as possible in the Word document that's being shared between us. I would at least once a week go in. If you have problems with connecting to the internet, at least go in once a week and upload your information to this document. So again, the information during our tutoring session is updated, and I can see where you are at that particular time. And so I hope this helps. I hope this gives you an idea of kind of a justification as to how and why I present and give feedback this way. Again, any doubts that you have with regard to my feedback or how I'm giving feedback, we can discuss that whenever you wish. So I hope this explanation helps, and I look forward to seeing your work.